The Jodi Arias murder trial.
We find the defendant guilty.
A behind the headlines exclusive.
So what is the untold story?
New details revealed from the prosecution.
Except for that one mistake. She probably would have gotten away with it.
A jury member.
You're saying one juror seemed to completely ignore the evidence.
Jodi and her defense team were manipulating her.
And the victim's friends and family.
She actually came to the memorial service that was held for Travis.
She's up there in the front row, smiling.
You said that you guys would catch her spying on him.
My wife said, Travis, we're afraid we're gonna find you chopped up in her freezer.
She thought the camera was washed clean, but the memory card survived, and time stamped the hours before murder. In a case built on lies, the photos told the truth.
When you walk into a homicide scene where there's 27 stab wounds and defensive wounds and a gunshot wound to the forehead, you know that there's rage and jealousy and some very intense emotion behind that action. That's personal.
What drives a person to transform from a seemingly ordinary romantic partner into a killer whose name becomes infamous around the world? In 2008, America was confronted with that very question when motivational speaker Travis Alexander was found brutally murdered in his Arizona home. The prime suspect was not a stranger nor a career criminal. It was Jodi Arias, his ex-girlfriend, who once appeared to be caring, soft-spoken, and deeply devoted to him. The case quickly captured national attention, not because of lurid details alone, but because it exposed something chilling: the thin line between passion and obsession. It forced the public to grapple with disturbing questions about control, psychological instability, and the destructive potential of unresolved relationships. But Jodi Arias' story didn't begin with murder. To understand how she became one of America's most notorious killers, we have to go back to her origins, her childhood, her personality, and the psychological forces that shaped her into the woman who could commit such an act. Jodi Arias' childhood and psychological roots. Jodi Ann Arias entered the world on July 9, 1980 in Salinas, California. At first glance, her early years did not suggest that she would later become one of the most infamous figures in American true crime history. But, as with many individuals who go on to commit shocking acts of violence, her childhood environment and psychological development provide critical insight into how she became the person she did. Jodi was the first daughter in a working-class family, and her parents, by her later accounts, were strict disciplinarians. Jodi described her upbringing as emotionally turbulent, often emphasizing that her mother in particular could be physically and emotionally abusive. According to Jodi's retelling, discipline at home was not simply about teaching lessons, but frequently crossed into humiliation and violence. She recalled growing up feeling unloved, misunderstood, and isolated. Members of her family, however, disputed the extent of her allegations, painting a more nuanced picture. They acknowledged that Jodi's parents enforced rules with firmness, but denied that they abused her. This discrepancy is not uncommon in high-profile cases. The individual who later commits a crime may construct a personal narrative that either magnifies their suffering or reframes it in a way that explains their later actions. Regardless of the exact truth, what is undeniable is that Jodi's formative years left her feeling alienated and unstable. Forensic psychologists emphasize that children who grow up in such environments, where affection is inconsistent and discipline feels harsh, are at high risk of developing insecure or disorganized attachment styles. These attachment patterns can manifest in adulthood as chronic difficulties with trust, emotional regulation, and identity. In Jodi's case, early instability seemed to plant the seeds for an enduring fear of rejection and a deep, gnawing need for control in relationships. Friends and acquaintances who knew her as a child and teenager described Jodi as creative, sensitive, and artistic. She had a natural gift for drawing and later developed a keen eye for photography. But beneath the artistic surface, she displayed traits that would become more concerning over time. Those close to her often noticed mood swings, moments of charm and warmth, followed by bursts of anger, tears, or apparent despair. Psychologists looking back at this period have suggested that Jodi demonstrated features often associated with borderline personality traits, an unstable sense of self, extreme emotional reactions, and volatile interpersonal relationships. The hallmark of such traits is a persistent fear of abandonment, often leading the person to cling tightly to relationships or lash out at the slightest hint of rejection. By her teenage years, these patterns were becoming firmly established. Jodi was not only eager to be loved, but also desperate to avoid being left behind. She learned to adapt her appearance, beliefs, and even her personality to fit the expectations of those around her. In psychology, this is sometimes described as identity diffusion, a fragmented self-image that shifts depending on external validation. Rather than possessing a strong, grounded sense of self, Jodi's identity seemed to hinge on who she was dating, what her peers thought of her, and how others perceived her. This dynamic foreshadowed her later relationship with Travis Alexander. In adolescence, the cracks were visible, but perhaps not alarming. By adulthood, however, they became the defining force of her romantic life, where affection, passion, and intimacy were always overshadowed by possession, manipulation, and ultimately violence. Early adulthood and relationships. Meeting Travis Alexander, a picture, perfect beginning. Travis Alexander, born in 1977, was the kind of man who inspired admiration. A devout Mormon, he had overcome a difficult childhood to build a successful career as a motivational speaker and salesman.
Yeah, what's certain is we don't know what day is our final day here on this earth. But what is for certain is that tomorrow is one day closer.
He was charismatic, ambitious, and deeply connected to his faith. When Travis and Jodi met at a work event in Las Vegas in September 2006, sparks flew almost instantly. Friends recalled that Travis was captivated by her beauty and confidence, while Jodi seemed eager to step into his world. The relationship developed quickly, filled with glamorous trips, affectionate photos, and declarations of love.
Travis and Jodi Arias met in September of 2006 at a work conference in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Travis had an extra ticket to this work conference, and there were people in the company that said, hey, we're looking at this woman named Jodi. She's cute. I think you'd like her. Would you want to give her your other ticket?
But beneath this perfect exterior, problems began to surface almost immediately. Travis's friends noticed that Jodi was intensely possessive. She seemed unwilling to share his attention, often inserting herself into his life in ways that felt invasive. To those who knew him, Travis seemed increasingly uneasy, describing Jodi as obsessed and even sociopathic. For Travis, the relationship was complicated. On one hand, he felt guilty about pulling away, especially because their relationship was deeply intimate in ways that conflicted with his Mormon values. On the other hand, he knew she was not the person he wanted for his long-term future. For Jodi, however, the idea of losing Travis was unthinkable. This imbalance created a toxic cycle. Every time Travis tried to distance himself, Jodi pulled harder, refusing to let go. Their romance, once filled with passion, began to spiral into jealousy, manipulation, and control. Travis Alexander's life and dreams. Before diving deeper into Jodi's psychology and the crimes that followed, it's important to pause and remember Travis Alexander not only as a victim, but as a person. Travis had endured a difficult childhood, marked by neglect and hardship. Both of his parents struggled with addiction, and he was raised in a chaotic environment until he eventually moved in with his grandparents, who introduced him to the Mormon faith. This faith became a cornerstone of his identity, giving him purpose and stability. By his late 20s, Travis had become a respected motivational speaker, inspiring others with his story of resilience and determination. He dreamed of building a family, finding a partner who shared his values, and creating a life filled with meaning. Friends described him as generous, charismatic, and someone who made others feel valued. Travis's story makes his tragic end even more heartbreaking. He was a man who had overcome so much, only to fall victim to a relationship that spiraled into obsession and violence. Escalation of obsession. By 2007, the cracks in Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander's relationship had widened into something far more troubling. Though the pair had officially broken up, Jodi refused to accept that the romance was over. For For her, separation was not an ending, but a challenge, a rejection that needed to be overturned. Instead of moving on with her own life, she clung more tightly than ever, taking steps that alarmed both Travis and those around him. Not long after their breakup, Jodi relocated from California to Mesa, Arizona, just a short drive from Travis's home. The move was explained to friends and acquaintances as a fresh start, but to Travis's circle, it was clear that Jodi had moved for one reason: to remain in his orbit. Her behaviors soon escalated into what many of his friends later described as stalking. She would appear uninvited at his home, sometimes late at night. On more than one occasion, she was discovered lurking in his backyard or sneaking inside without permission.
Hours upon hours of phone conversations. We just discovered a lot of common interests and grew close.
Travis lives in Mesa, Arizona. Jodi lives in California, so they're having a long-distance relationship.
The new couple would often get together and go on trips. Jodi documented in photos she posted on her MySpace page.
I'm always pointing the camera in every direction, and he was always a very enthusiastic and willing subject.
In one particularly unsettling incident, Jodi crawled through the doggy door of Travis's house to gain entry. For most people, such an act would have been an unmistakable signal of obsession. But for Jodi, it seemed like a desperate attempt to insert herself back into his life, no matter how inappropriate the means. Reports of vandalism soon surfaced: slashed tires on Travis's car, unexplained break-ins, and other forms of harassment. While no one witnessed Jodi committing these acts, Travis's friends were convinced she was behind them. They recognized the pattern: an ex-partner who refused to let go, escalating her behavior each time she felt him slip further away. Travis himself was not oblivious to the danger. He confided in friends, describing Jodi as someone he feared. In his private writings, he used the word sociopath to characterize her, acknowledging her lack of boundaries and manipulative tendencies. Yet, despite his recognition of the threat, Travis struggled to cut her off entirely. Their bond was toxic but magnetic, pulling him back into cycles of intimacy and separation. This kind of push-and-pull relationship is common in dynamics marked by obsessive attachment. Psychologists explain that when individuals suffer from an intense fear of abandonment, rejection can feel catastrophic. June 2008. The crime? That storm reached its breaking point in June 2008. On June 4th, Jodi Arias made her way to Travis Alexander's home in Mesa, Arizona. Though she would later claim her trip was meant to visit friends in Utah, the evidence showed otherwise. The day began without apparent conflict. Forensic evidence and photographs retrieved from Travis's digital camera suggest the pair spent the afternoon together consensually. The images show them in intimate moments, and later, Travis posing in the shower while Jodi stood behind the lens. To any outsider, the pictures might have looked like a couple rekindling old affection. But hidden behind those photographs was a far more sinister reality. At some point, the tone shifted dramatically. Travis was attacked inside his bathroom in one of the most brutal killings investigators had ever encountered. He suffered 27 stab wounds. His throat was slit from ear to ear, and he was shot in the head. The sheer ferocity of the attack shocked even seasoned detectives. Forensic psychologists refer to this level of violence as overkill, a term that signals not just intent to kill, but to annihilate. This was not an act of sudden self-defense, as Jodi would later claim. It was personal, intimate, and filled with rage. Overkill is often seen in crimes of passion, but in Jodi's case, it suggested something deeper, an attempt to obliterate the object of her rejection, to assert ultimate control in the most violent way possible. When Jodi left that house, she believed she had erased her presence. But 5 days later, on June 9th, Travis's friends, alarmed after not hearing from him, forced entry into his home. What they discovered was a nightmare. Travis's body was slumped in his shower, the bathroom and hallway painted with blood that told a story of chaos and struggle. The scene was so graphic that even experienced officers described it as haunting. Investigation and evidence. From the beginning, Jodi Arias was a person of interest. She was the ex-girlfriend who refused to leave, the woman friends described as obsessive, and the person Travis himself had called dangerous. But suspicion turned into certainty when detectives uncovered one piece of evidence that would change everything: Travis's digital camera. It had been discovered in his washing machine, as though someone had attempted to destroy it, but forensic experts were able to recover deleted files, and what they found was damning. The photos told the story of June 4th with chilling precision. there were pictures of Jodi and Travis together.
That's obviously Travis's house, right? Remember that?
Yeah. If Travis were here today, he would tell you that it wasn't me.
No. My job is to speak for Travis right now, and everything Travis is telling me.
Images of intimacy that contradicted her initial alibi. Then, photos of Travis in the shower, taken just moments before the murder. And finally, a blurred image that investigators believe captured the beginning of the attack itself. This photographic record destroyed Jodi's claim that she had not been in Arizona. It placed her at the scene and provided a timeline leading directly into the killing. It also suggested something prosecutors would later argue in court.
I realized looking back on it that it kind of sounded immature. It's more like my dear Travis kind of letter. And so I took it down because...
More personal?
Yeah, some of it was detailed, a little bit more personal. Not too personal, nothing inappropriate. Just, I just felt funny. I think because I'm a photographer, I tend to communicate more through pictures. So I posted a ton of pictures that I have of him. And I have a ton more that I just can't access right now. And videos and things that I know his family would want, but...
That Jodi planned to memorialize her control, even in the act of destroying Travis. When confronted with the evidence, Jodi's stories began to shift. At first, she insisted she had not been in Arizona at all. When presented with the recovered photographs, she changed her story, claiming that masked intruders had broken in, killed Travis, and spared her life. But when that account unraveled under scrutiny, she shifted again. This time admitting that she had killed Travis, but claiming it was in self-defense after years of alleged abuse. To investigators, the constant contradictions were proof of manipulation. Instead of the frightened honesty of a battered woman, Jodi displayed the cold adaptability of someone willing to say anything to escape accountability. Each shifting story deepened the perception that she was calculating, deceitful, and dangerous. For the public, these revelations were almost surreal. Here was a woman who presented herself as soft-spoken and vulnerable, yet the evidence showed she had committed one of the most violent crimes imaginable, and then attempted to cover it up with lies. The evidence and her behavior combined into a portrait that prosecutors would later use powerfully in court. Jodi Arias as a woman who could not accept rejection, whose obsession turned deadly, and who, even after the fact, believed she could manipulate the truth to her advantage. Interrogation and psychology. The interrogation of Jodi Arias has become one of the most memorable and unsettling chapters of the entire case. Unlike most suspects accused of a brutal killing, Arias did not appear distraught, terrified, or remorseful when left alone in the small Arizona police interview room. Instead, she behaved in ways that baffled detectives and later shocked the public once the footage was released. On the tapes, Jodi alternated between dramatically different moods. At times, she appeared calm and collected, answering data, trial, a battle of narratives. By 2013, nearly 5 years after the murder, Jodi Arias stood trial for the first-degree murder of Travis Alexander. The courtroom quickly transformed into a stage, broadcast live to millions across the country. This trial was not only about facts and evidence, it became a battle of narratives, with the prosecution and defense offering starkly different portrayals of Arias and her actions. In a highly unusual move, Jodi herself took the witness stand and testified for an astonishing 18 days. Over the course of her testimony, she attempted to paint herself as the victim of an abusive relationship. She claimed Travis had manipulated, degraded, and even physically assaulted her, creating a dynamic where she feared for her life. According to her version of events, the killing was an act of self-defense, tragic, but necessary. But prosecutors methodically dismantled this story. They presented overwhelming physical evidence, the recovered photographs, the timeline constructed from phone records and gas receipts, and the horrific crime scene itself. They argued that Jodi had planned the murder, pointing to her road trip preparations, the purchase of gas cans, and her efforts to destroy evidence afterward. The brutality of the attack, 27 stab wounds, a slit throat, and a gunshot, was presented as proof that this was not self-defense, but premeditated rage. Forensic experts also testified about Jodi's psychological traits. They described patterns consistent with borderline personality disorder, intense fear of abandonment, unstable relationships, and extreme reactions to rejection. Others pointed to narcissistic features, emphasizing her manipulativeness, her constant need to control the narrative, and her lack of genuine remorse. The defense faced an uphill battle. Their strategy rested heavily on portraying Travis as abusive, but this account clashed with the testimony of his friends and family, who described him as generous, kind, and ambitious. While no one denied that the relationship had been complicated and at times unhealthy, the defense's attempt to vilify Travis alienated many jurors. Instead of creating sympathy for Jodi, it came across as an effort to rewrite reality.
Bragged about that.
Then, Jodi surprises everyone when, in an interview, she admits that she was with Travis when he died.
Jodi said that actually she was there, but she didn't do the killing. 2 masked intruders just somehow found their way into this house, killed Travis, and left without leaving a trace of DNA or any evidence.
He was screaming, and I was by the bathtub. I remember putting my hand on his back because he was on all 4 of his knees. He was like on his knees like this, doing something like this or something like, I don't know. And I was like, are you okay? What's going on? What's going on? He's like, go get help, go get help. And I said, okay. And I turned around, there were 2 people there. One was a guy and one was a girl.
Just as she had done during her shifting interrogation stories. In the end, the trial exposed not just the details of a horrific crime, but the psychological struggle to control the narrative. Jodi Arias insisted on telling her version, clinging to the belief that she could convince the jury she was a victim. The prosecution, armed with evidence and expert testimony, countered with a portrait of obsession, rage, and manipulation. It was this clash between Jodi's self-styled performance and the prosecution's carefully built case that turned the trial into a spectacle watched around the world. Verdict and aftermath. After months of testimony and public debate, the jury returned a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. The sentencing phase, however, revealed divisions. Jurors could not agree unanimously on the death penalty, resulting in life imprisonment without parole.
State of Arizona versus Jodi Arias, sentencing verdict. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in above entitled action upon our oaths, unanimously find, having considered all of the facts and circumstances, that the defendant should be sentenced. No unanimous agreement. Signed, foreperson.
For Travis's family, it was justice, though no sentence could undo their loss. For the public, it was closure to one of the most sensational trials of the decade, but also the continuation of fascination with Jodi Arias, who continued giving interviews and proclaiming her innocence from behind bars.
Physically or emotionally?
Both. She had acrylic nails, so sometimes she would grab me and dig her nails into my skin. As I became a teenager, my dad would get rougher and rougher. One time I hit a doorpost. The side of my head hit the doorpost and it knocked me out momentarily.
Designed for your most vile and lustful pleasures?
He was threatening me. I just felt like he was being a complete bully. Took my arms and shoved me down. Started shaking me and said, I'm sick of you.
He wanted to do a photo shoot of what?
He wanted me to dress up like Little Red Riding Hood. And he body slammed me on the floor at the foot of his bed. He said, don't act like that hurts. Called me a and kicked me in the ribs. I screamed really loud. I think I yelled out my finger in my hand.
Reflecting not only the dangers of obsession, but also the public's own obsession with crime stories. Lessons from obsession. The Jodi Arias case remains one of the most studied true crime stories of the 21st century. Beyond the media spectacle, it serves as a cautionary tale about the destructive power of obsession, the danger of manipulation, and the devastating consequences of untreated psychological instability. At its heart, the case is not just about Jodi Arias. It is about Travis Alexander, a man whose life was cut short by violence he could not escape. His story reminds us of the importance of listening to red flags, of protecting ourselves from toxic relationships, and of recognizing the psychological patterns that can lead love to turn deadly. For society, the trial forced reflection on how we consume crime as entertainment, how media can turn tragedy into spectacle, and how justice can be influenced by public opinion. And for psychology, it remains a vivid case study, how childhood wounds, personality disorders, and fear of abandonment can combine into a perfect storm that ends in murder. Ultimately, the Jodi Arias case is a reminder that obsession disguised as love is not love at all. It is control, fear, and destruction. And perhaps the most sobering point of all, tragedies like this show how dangerous it can be when warning signs are ignored. Sometimes, the difference between safety and catastrophe is recognizing when to walk away. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. And support us by subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.